Hello? Maybe? Maybe we're live. I can't see it for some reason. There we go. I think we're live. We'll see. Hopefully someone will join. Because I think I accidentally started the stream with it on private. I think we're live on public now. Felipe is straight in. Bottolo Norris. Great. Arvind, hello. Hello, Josh. Hello, this is a surprise. This is a surprise indeed. This is not the norm by any stretch of the imagination. This is not the standard in terms of a Friday. But you know what? I was sitting here being moderately unproductive, if I'm honest, and thinking to myself, I could just do with a little chat during free practice one. There are a lot of big news stories in the F1 rumor mill and also just in the F1 news at the moment, plus a championship that could be decided here in Qatar this weekend. So I figured, why not? An extra bonus stream for you lovely, lovely people, and also for myself, so that we can row it on, have a chat about the Formula One grid, have a chat about the Formula One future, and get ready for the Qatar Grand Prix weekend. So I'm only going to be live for like the hour of free practice one, because we are live again later anyway for sprint qualifying. Then we're live tomorrow twice for the actual sprint race and full qualifying. And then we're live on Sunday twice as well. So like, we don't need more streams, but I figured why not? It's a little bit of a treat. Oh, I've just realized I haven't updated the team standings from last time. Apologies if you're watching on the shorts feed. That team standings is like 2 races ago because I haven't clicked the right one. Ferrari were in second place in the constructor standings. How quickly it can change in a couple of Grand Prix. That is pretty saddening if you're a Ferrari fan, isn't it? Bless them. But we are going to be live for free practice one. I've got a few things that I want to air and have a chat to you guys about, and also just watch some free practice one times. Is the only free practice session of the weekend, so it could be a slightly tasty one. How do I feel about the double disqualification? Great question. If you didn't see the Crash Happy podcast, the 4 boys over there, me, alongside Mr. V, Pulse, Dando Skill, and Formula Duck. It's been a long day. The 4 of them let me know about it pretty quickly on Monday night when we recorded. Yeah, it was not very good, was it? It was just like the most McLaren thing possible. You know, they've got 2 drivers that should comfortably win the Drivers' Championship. Like, it should be done and dusted already by now. In fact, it would be done and dusted already had they not had, or had Lando Norris not had, a disqualification in Vegas and the DNF in Zandvoort. If he'd have got those points, it would already be done. So, like, they are the margins that we are working with when you're a McLaren fan. The championship should already be over, but 2 DNFs over the second half of the season, right? 2 DNFs in 8 races for Lando Norris means that we still have 2 more weekends to go, and it means that Max Verstappen is still mathematically within contention. Well, not even mathematically within contention. He is equally likely to win the championship with Oscar Piastri, both 24 points behind. I think it's Lando's title realistically, but never count out Mad Max. I think all 3 of them are in it. I think the pressure on Lando Norris to perform this weekend, it's been a weekend where we've expected McLaren to be strong throughout the last couple of years, and Max Verstappen has still managed to go on and win it. Like, he has been able to get the victories over McLaren here, even when they have been strong. I know Oscar won the sprint race. I know Lando was very unlucky last year, kind of got that penalty, which took him all the way down the order. But Max is strong here, and the Red Bull car is strong here, and the McLarens are not as strong as we expect them to be here. So I don't think it's done and dusted, signed, sealed, and delivered to Lando Norris by any stretch of the imagination. I think he'll get it over the line. I'm not so sure he'll get it over the line this weekend, though. I've got a lot of people sort of saying, oh, well, he only needs a 1-point swing in his favor and then it's championship done. And, you know, he's done that more than enough times over this season so far, where he's managed to outscore Oscar Piastri and Max Verstappen by a point. Like, it's not that hard, especially if he goes on to win the Grand Prix. But it's going to be fiddly. I don't think everything's going to play into Lando Norris's favor. It's not been the season that has given him the easiest run to a championship. Hello, Sally. How's it going? We are indeed live for a free practice one. I just couldn't find any momentum. I was writing some scripts for things. I was writing some shorts down. I was like, could I record this? Should I do that? I wasn't really doing anything in particular. So instead, we've gone live. Got to keep the lights on. We'll go live. We'll get some chat going before the Qatar Grand Prix weekend. But yeah, in terms of Lando Norris winning the championship this weekend, most certainly could. I mean, goes out, it's in his hands, he wins the race, it's done. Assuming that the sprint doesn't go absolutely horrendously. I just think Max Verstappen will probably go on to win this Grand Prix. I've just got a feeling that it will be Max all the way to Abu Dhabi. He's done so well. Like, think, Max Verstappen was 104 points behind Oscar Piastri after Zandvoort. He is now on equal points with Oscar Piastri going into Qatar. Like, that is insane. And Andrea Stella was talking about it a little bit earlier on. He was sort of saying, you know, the season is so long now, with it being 24 races, that actually the season does go through these phases almost. Oh, in fact, let me swap to this so that I can actually have it in front of me. Pop that there. There you go. Yeah, Andrea Stella was saying earlier on today, like, the season has ebbed and flowed, and because it's 24 races now, you have quite a long time and also quite a few gaps in the season where things can change dramatically. Like, he was talking about how Lando Norris started the season and wasn't very comfortable inside of the McLaren car, and that allowed Oscar Piastri to kind of be at his best. Then we had a middle stint of the season just before the summer break where we were just going, well, both of the McLarens are absolutely electric. Lando Norris had kind of found his form. Oscar Piastri was also continuing to pick up wins here and there, if slightly less than Lando Norris, but it was still super, super competitive. And then we've come into the second half of the season where there's been a real dip for McLaren. The Red Bull has been really consistent and quick. Like, Max Verstappen has clicked with that car finally this season. And, you know, put in races like Monza and Baku where the McLaren cars weren't at their absolute best, but Max Verstappen was able to dominate those races. And we've seen like a real ebb and flow throughout the season where I quite like it. Like, I think, you know, we complain about the season being longer because it does mean more races and the teams are stretched thinner and the drivers, you know, do just look absolutely knackered at points throughout the season, and it's really tough on the teams. But on the flip side of that, you know, now it being 24 races rather than 14 or whatever, I suppose it was like 19 or so in the last few years before the big jump up into the 20s. So I quite like the more races there are, the more twists and turns we seem to have when it comes to these championship battles, right? What is this Cadillac politics? Do I think Cadillac will be a midfield runner next year? Ooh, loads of questions about Cadillac. Wasn't going to talk about Cadillac. I don't think there'll be a midfield runner, no. I think maybe there'll be... I think if they can finish anywhere but last, right, in the Constructors, now that I actually think about it, if they finish 10th in the Constructors, it's actually pretty good going. Like, that means they're going to have to displace a team that has already been on the grid for a considerable number of years. Like, Haas have been on the grid now since 2016. They are not like a brand new team to the sport. They're nearly a decade old now, Haas. And like everyone else then on top of that is even older, right? You know, even Mercedes, who joined the grid, I suppose technically in 2010, but You can argue, well, they were in the grid in the 50s, but we'll say Mercedes in the 2010, they were able to jump up and be competitive within 3 years, really. So it can happen. I think for me, anything other than 11th place would be a positive. I think 2028 is the real opportunity for Cadillac to be like, right, big step up, and starting to think about what they're doing. And Audi have said a similar thing, right? Audi have said that they've really got their eyes on 2028 more so than 2026. As much as there's a huge shake-up on the grid for 2026, I think 2028 is the real goal for a lot of those sort of midfieldy teams. It's more the top-end teams that are looking at 2026 and the ability to jump up and dominate straight away. Haas usually do good in a reg change. That's also true. They started 2022 very solidly, didn't they? Audi and Cadillac will be the next year. I don't know about Audi, though, because Audi already have that grounding. Like, Sauber are still doing a lot of the aerodynamics work, and Sauber are still working very, very hard on that car. Like, as much as it is going to be Audi branded, it's a bit... I was going to say it's a bit like when they were Alfa Romeo, but that's definitely not the case. Like, Alfa Romeo did almost nothing. Audi are putting in a lot of effort, and obviously Audi also producing the power unit and things like that. So I think we kind of underestimate how much Sauber are still putting into it. Told me to jork the hardest. Dan No Skill, that man. I do love him. I do bloody love him. But my goodness me, can he make up some absolute nonsense sometimes? I feel like me and Dan have a very love-hate relationship. I think he hates me. I love him. and that's the way it goes. How do I think Red Bull will do next year? Well, actually, I was going to talk about Red Bull a little bit because we've had a little movement, I guess, in the Red Bull drivers situation. We still don't know exactly how it's going to look for Red Bull and RB next season. In fact, they're the only team that we don't know exactly how it's going to look for next season. All the other seats for 2026 are now fully confirmed. There wasn't as dramatic of a driver change as there was in 2025. You know, a lot of rookies came in last year. A lot of teams getting their ducks in order for the 2026 regulation change, making sure they've got their drivers in a year early. That's why we saw Lewis Hamilton move a year early, for instance, although we could talk about that later. He doesn't seem very happy. But he moved a year early so that he could get a year under his belt at Ferrari before the regulation change. You could argue the same for a lot of the teams, really, like bringing in Bortoleto, bringing in Antonelli, bringing in Behrman when they did. It's the right time to move into a new driver, give them a year in Formula One so they can get used to the pattern of how things go, and they can get used to communicating with the team and understanding the philosophy behind the scenes, before then also giving them a real shake-up and a brand new car. And I think actually that will play into the favor of quite a lot of the new drivers. Like, I think sometimes for the older drivers, we saw it a little bit in 2022. It can be quite hard for some of the older drivers on the grid to adapt to a brand new car because they've almost got themselves into quite a bit of muscle memory with the cars as they were before. As George Russell saying, his cockpit is very hot. I mean, they are in Qatar. But yeah, I think actually, you know, if you look at Bortoleto or you look at Antonelli, they have literally driven a brand new car every single season since they left karting, right? They don't stay in formulas very, very long. Like Bortoleto winning Formula 3, winning Formula 2, coming straight into Formula 1. He was only spending a season in each. Antonelli skipped Formula 3. So like he was only spending a season in each car that he had before. Behrman had a couple of years, I suppose. Hadjar have 2 years in Formula 2? I don't think so. Can't remember off the top of my head now, but they are used to jumping from one car to the next. You know, they are used to going from one car which drives in this way to this car to this car to this car. So I think that plays into the favor of the rookie drivers. But going back to your question, which Joss has also just hinted at there, like Lawson versus Sonoda versus Hadjar, That idea of which of those three will be jumping up into the main Red Bull team next year. I don't think it's going to be Liam Lawson again. Like, I think they kind of did that once. I thought it was a very, very harsh how they treated him, but they never seem to go back on themselves, do they? Like, Gasly was performing very well in the AlphaTauri car for a little while and never even got a real sniff at going back into the main Red Bull team. And when Sergio Perez was there, and obviously Gasly ended up, swapping over to Alpine to try and escape that Red Bull cycle. I think we could see, by the way that the drivers have been talking. So, for instance, like Isaac Hadjar said to the press on Thursday, like he knows he's going to be on the grid next season. So he already knows that Hadjar already knows that he's got a seat guaranteed for next year. He just wasn't willing to say where that seat is going to be. As Oscar Piastri goes second fastest to Max Verstappen. Started to heat up now. We're on the hard compound tyre, though, at the moment. So I want to see some soft compound tyre running, or maybe even like some mediums, just to see what we're going to have going into the sprint race tomorrow. But hard compound tyres on the cars at the moment. Yeah, I think Hadjar, the way that he was speaking to the press and the fact that he knows he's got a seat for next year, I could see Hadjar sort of, and the fact he was fairly positive about it, right? As positive as Hadjar can be, he's not a positive man, but he was fairly positive about his future and fairly positive about what's happening next year. Whereas Yuki Tsunoda, kind of a little bit more dejected in his interview, has maybe been given a little bit of a marching order, possibly by Helmut Marko, because Tsunoda was more so talking about the fact that, he's there to help out Verstappen in the championship fight, etc., etc. Whereas Hadjar was more talking about next season and finishing this season strong. Hadjar wants to finish as high as possible in the Drivers' Championship and maybe get himself up into 9th place, but also, he was talking about next year and the fact that he is staying on the Formula One grid. So I think we're likely to see Hadjar alongside Verstappen. I don't think that's a crazy statement to say. Then it's whether Tsunoda goes back into the Racing Bulls team, or Liam Lawson stays, or we see Arvid Lindblad obviously come up from Formula 2 into Formula 1. And it's kind of those three drivers again vying for those couple of seats. I could see this being, and it's a little bit tough on Tsunoda here, but I think I could see Tsunoda being dropped completely, and maybe we see Arvid Lindblad come in alongside Liam Lawson in that second team. And it's a long drop for Tsunoda, right? The fact that he has been dropped from the main team, not even down to the sister team, but all the way down, and possibly sits himself in like a weird testing role, or maybe just sees himself out of Formula One completely in any kind of capacity. I do feel like it is going to be the end of Yuki Tsunoda in that sense. Does Tsunoda then get himself like a testing role at Aston Martin with the Honda connection? Again, I don't think he's going to end up in one of those main Aston Martin seats, but I could see Tsunoda maybe getting a link there because he's, been a Honda driver for so long. You could be like Albon in 21. All that, yeah, he just completely disappears, right? Disappears off the grid, goes to do something else. I don't know if he'll stay in the Red Bull stable, though, like Albon did. I think Albon staying with Red Bull at that. But then I suppose, if you're not going to stay with Red Bull and you can't get yourself in with any other team, like McLaren are not going to pick up Yuki Tsunoda, and Mercedes are not going to pick up Yuki Tsunoda as like a test driver or anything like that. It's just, I don't think they have that connection with him and they'll have that relationship to be able to do that. I think Tsunoda has one link going to Aston Martin and being some kind of test role / simulator driver, something along those lines for the team because of that Honda connection. Then kind of looking at the rest of the grid, I don't know, does he go to like an Alpine as a reserve driver? I think that's a bit rubbish, to be honest. I think Aston Martin as a reserve driver, as a test driver, is maybe the one saving grace for Yuki Tsunoda to sort of stay within at least the Formula One sphere, if not on the Formula One grid for the foreseeable future, which does then lead us quite nicely into Aston Martin. Obviously, the big news from Aston Martin this week, a little bit of a shuffle around in terms of who is in charge of what. So Andy Cowell, who they nabbed from Mercedes, is the team principal at the moment. They're having a little shuffle around. He has been sort of very dedicated to the engine side of things. He's been working very closely with Honda on those power units. So I think, his move over to the engine power unit side of things makes sense from Aston Martin. They've decided that Andy is going to be more dedicated to that and sort of alleviate his team principal roles a touch. And I can understand that. Makes sense. But then that does leave a little void at the top of Aston Martin for Phil, to Phil. Like, they've shuffled around their team principal quite a lot. You could go all the way back to, like, Otmar when they had him in Aston Martin. They had Mike Crack. Then they had Andy. They are going for a completely different direction. Adrian Newey is the new team principal at Aston Martin. I don't know how I feel about it. Like, of course, Adrian Newey, known as possibly the greatest car designer in Formula One history. Like, he has been able to produce cars that other people just don't even understand. And okay, yes, there's been championship winning cars here and there, and you could say, well, he didn't win championships when Mercedes were winning the championships, but that was more about the power unit that Mercedes had at that time and the fact that they were just so much clear of everybody else. There wasn't much that Adrian Newey could do in terms of the design side of things. Going into 2022, though, you have Adrian Newey at Red Bull going into a ground effect era, an era that he'd worked in previously. That's how long he's been on the Formula One grid before. He already had an understanding of these ground effect cars. And he goes on to produce aerodynamically the most stable car and therefore the most dominant car that we have seen in Formula One history, possibly. That 2023 season with Max Verstappen, absolutely phenomenal. So it depends how much next year. Kind of depends on the aero versus the power unit, because there are big power unit changes, but there are even bigger aerodynamic changes. So Adrian Newey being sort of brought into Aston Martin to oversee those aerodynamic changes to the car, I completely understood. I don't know if Adrian Newey has... Well, he's got the experience. He's worked with an incredible roster of drivers. Like, you look at the drivers that Adrian Newey has been in teams with, and he has been, blessed with the drivers that he's been able to design cars for. But at the same time, does he have the personality, the nous of like one of the best team principals? Does he have that ability? Maybe it's changed, Maybe Formula One has changed now where you don't need to be sort of I was almost going to go like Eddie Jordan type, where you are the man running the team, but also you're behind the scenes, you're making the deals happen. But Toto Wolff is kind of in that build as well, Toto Wolff is I was going to say a wheeler dealer, which seems a little bit over-exaggerative, because Toto Wolff a little bit more cool, calm, collected than an Eddie Jordan. Oh, someone's gone in the gravel there. Didn't see who. George Russell, quickest of anybody at the moment. Piastri also looking a lot more comfortable inside of that McLaren car. Lando Norris standing 18th, by the way. But yeah, you look at the team principals that have won things and the team principals that are kind of rising up. You even look at like Fred Vasseur, for instance. Fred Vasseur, the reason that Ferrari kind of brought him in when they did, and the reason he's lasted at Ferrari so long compared to some of the other team principals that Ferrari have had in recent years, like they've backed Fred Vasseur going into next season as well, I think it's because he's got a little bit more about him. He's got that personality which also backs up his ability, because he does produce results and he has done well. Toto Wolff literally owns part of the team, so I suppose slightly different. Christian Horner, you could argue, has delivered results. Red Bull have always been a competitive top team whilst Christian Horner was at the helm. They've kind of continued on that now with Laurent Mekies for the second half of this season. I just think Adrian Newey just is a very different character. Is he almost Matteo Binotto like in terms of being a team principal, but being a little bit more techie? I suppose Andrea Stella is slightly that, but Andrea Stella, I also feel like has a bit more personality, a little bit more va-va-voom, if you will, about him compared to Adrian Newey. Maybe it's just because the interviews of Adrian Newey I've seen, he hasn't been overly charismatic. Like, I think he's an incredibly intelligent man, but doesn't have the charisma, the tete-a-tete that the other team principals do when it comes to interviews and it comes to talking to people. So I think it's an odd decision, if I'm honest with you, the move for Adrian Newey. Obviously, the link before that was the fact that Christian Horner could have been going back there, but I don't know. Let me see what they said. Alonso said managing the team's technical development of the car, but also the people that was needed and taking care of which areas. We need to reinforce the team with other areas that are less important. So in a way, he was doing internally a lot of management, and Andy was doing a lot of management as well on the engine side of the engine integration to the chassis. So two of the best people working in the best places, and the team is in good hands. Believes the team is still evolving, given that it's young, energetic people that need guidance from Adrian. So, I mean, of course, Fernando Alonso's never going to say that it was a bad decision for them to get Adrian Newey in as team principal, considering he's literally going to be his team principal next year. But I don't personally understand it. I'd love to know what other people put, though. I mean, literally the headline on the race is just odd. Yeah, it seems a little bit odd to like go from engineering the car in the way that he was and being the head of aero in the way that he was to then jumping straight up to being team principal. But maybe it's also to do with the role that he's got within the team. You know, he was given a lot of benefits, let's say, and a lot of money to move to Aston Martin when he did, and given a lot of control over various parts of the business. So maybe it's because of that control that he has, he's almost put himself into the line and been like, you know what, this is something I haven't been given the opportunity to do. So maybe he's sort of said, final stint of his Formula One career, likely, right? Adrian Newey's not getting any younger. I can imagine him retiring at some point in maybe the next 4 or 5 years. Maybe he does want just one roll of the dice at being a team principal, being in charge of a team the way that he was. Don't forget they're going into Honda engines next year. That's why Andy Cowell's moved across, right, though? Because Andy Cowell was very pivotal in the design about that. So it makes sense that he's kind of still within the team, but even more so now dedicated like solely to the engine side of things, effectively how it's going to go. I don't know when the change happens as well, because Andy Cowell is still team principal now, I assume. Or is Adrian Newey already team principal? No, taking up the reins at Aston Martin for 2026 and becoming the Formula One team principal from then onwards. So Andy Cowell is still team principal now. I'd imagine once the season finishes in a couple of weeks' time, shuffles over. Andy Cowell, purely dedicated to Honda and engines. And I mean, they've got a couple of months to get that sorted, right? January and February, then we're on track in March for testing. So, hello, Daniel of No Skill. How's it going? The Jamie is live. Being very complimentary about you earlier. Don't scroll back. Interested that Verstappen's... I just still think we're on the hard compound tyre at this moment in time. And we're not really going to see the hard compound tyre, I don't think. Because the Qatar, if you haven't seen, another mandatory two-stopper. Well, Monaco was mandatory two-stopper in a slightly different way, right? Monaco, they had to stop twice, but they could stop whenever they fancied. So you could have just stopped on lap 1, lap 2, and done the rest of the Grand Prix, which I think would have benefited some of the drivers in Monaco, to be fair. But actually, this time around, it's a 25 lap limit. On any tyre, you can only do 25 lap stints during the Grand Prix. So you have to pit effectively on lap 24 or before. I don't know what happens, actually. Does anyone know what happens if you do a 26 lap stint during the race? What actually happens? Because I haven't looked that up. And that's a question that has now come to my mind. Like, if you do just do I don't know, if there's an incident or something and you end up having to do 27 laps on a tyre, what happens? Like, the FIA surely can't just be like, maybe, I don't know. I was going to come up with a solution, but I don't know if there is one. I suppose it's just a penalty of some kind. Do I think everyone will pit the same lap? I mean, it makes sense too, right? It makes sense. I just don't think we're going to see the hard compound tire. I think we're going to see soft compound tire to start, because that makes sense. You can maybe get the jump at the start. You've got the best tire effectively for the first lap or two, where you can try and make some moves. And then you go on to the medium, maybe do 20 to 23 laps, I guess. And then on to another set of mediums at the end of the Grand Prix. Like, I can't see any team running the hard, because the point of the hard compound tire, especially if you run it early when you've got like high fuel, is that you can go longer than everyone else. But you literally cannot. You are in the regulations not allowed to go longer than anybody else. So everyone's just going to be trying to pit sooner rather than later. I think it's a bit of a weird rule. I'm not a massive fan of it. The only thing I think it does change, I think it plays into Max Verstappen's hands. I'll tell you that. And I'll tell you for why. I think when it comes to Max Verstappen, obviously he has got the run of Red Bull, right? If Yuki Tsunoda wants to come in and pit, and then Max Verstappen comes on the radio and says, no, I am pitting now, they're going to take Max Verstappen's word and tell Yuki Tsunoda, even if you've got to do 28 laps on those tires and you get a 30-second penalty or disqualified from the race, whatever it may be, they're going to leave Yuki Tsunoda out high and dry. Like, there is no chance that if Max Verstappen wants to come in, they're going to play any kind of favor into Yuki Tsunoda, right? Whereas, I think, especially in terms of qualifying tomorrow, and actually in terms of the race strategy, whichever McLaren is leading, because remember, whichever McLaren is leading will have precedent when it comes to pitting. We saw it with Lando Norris in Monza, where Lando Norris was actually able to decide when Piastri pitted versus when he pitted. Of course, then we had the whole slow pit stop thing, but by the by, Lando Norris was able to dictate who pitted when. I think when it comes to the two McLarens, they're going to be battling for track position so much, because strategy is going to be so integral tomorrow as to when who comes in and how, because those stints are mandated. Actually, Norris versus Piastri could be the most exciting battle that we have seen in a while, because we haven't really seen Norris and Piastri fight out on track. We haven't really seen them go wheel to wheel and side by side. You know, you could argue they did in Austin. It didn't end well. But we haven't properly seen them go at one another for more than just one scenario. Singapore, I guess, they were side by side, bounced off one another. But I think when it comes to tomorrow, we could actually see Norris and Piastri properly fighting for position, because they need to be ahead of their teammate in terms of the strategy. And Max Verstappen can play that, right? Max Verstappen can use that to his advantage, because he knows whichever McLaren is situated where, he can then just slot himself in and he can just run his own race. Max Verstappen is going to have the optimal strategy. And then the two McLarens are going to have slightly suboptimal, because they're going to have to play off one another, right? And they're going to have to move out of the way of one another and slot into laps where they maybe don't want to. So if lap 22 is the absolute perfect time to swap that first set of tires, and Lando Norris is the leader in McLaren, he'll get to pit on lap 22. But maybe then that leads to Piastri being the top McLaren in the second stint, and then Piastri gets to pick where he's going to shuffle in. And it then becomes way more complicated for McLaren in terms of strategy. And we know that McLaren have got to absolutely nail at least 4 pit stops. And they have been pretty horrendous when it's come to pit stops at certain points in this season. So I feel like it could be very, very awkward. And actually, the 25 lap mandated strategy stints, even though it's really weird and awkward, I think it actually makes tomorrow, the Grand Prix in a couple of days' time, a lot more exciting. So I've got to give it to them. They've made the Grand Prix. I think the strategy for the rest of the grid, it'll be really boring. But for the top drivers, I think it could be quite interesting. Certainly for the 2 McLarens, it could be quite interesting. I suppose that's the argument, right? Do you want the race to be exciting for the 3 championship rivals, or do you want the race to be exciting for everyone? And they have sided on the fact of they want the race to be exciting for the 3 championship rivals. Ready for another double DNF? I could see it happening. That's what I mean. I think there's going to be so much heat between the 2 McLaren cars. There's going to be so much dependence on track position that, who was it? Was it Russell and Hamilton? Yeah, it must have been Russell Hamilton in the Mercedes cars last year, a couple of years ago, when they came together in the opening lap. Like, I could see something similar happening. And then you go, okay, Max Verstappen 24 points behind. Let's play in the favor of McLaren in the sprint, maybe. And McLaren pick up a couple of more points than Max. Oh, I don't know. I'm saying that. I don't even think that's going to happen. But let's say it does. And Max Verstappen then wins the Grand Prix because the 2 McLarens take themselves out of the race. It does remove Oscar Piastri from the championship picture, but it does mean that Max Verstappen could be ahead of Lando Norris going into Abu Dhabi, or within at least a few points. If Max Verstappen is within 7 points, that would be absolutely insane, right? Because then it is fight for the victory. It is first place wins in Abu Dhabi. It's a little bit like what we had with Hamilton and Verstappen, you know, when you're so close in points and actually you are going to be the cars that are fighting for the victory. It is whoever wins the last Grand Prix wins the championship. I would be more than happy with that. Like, it would be a very, very exciting end to the season. As a McLaren fan, I don't want that. As a Formula One fan, I do want that. Haying any driver unless it's Mazepin is crazy. Depends. I feel like there's drivers that are less loved than others. Should we have a check-in? George Russell top of the standings at the moment. 14 laps done on those hard compound tyres, though, for George Russell. Again, we're still not seeing any qualifying simulation or anything like that. I think a lot of teams going for a longer stint on the hard compound tyre to sort of gauge the race pace that they're going to have. Although, again, I feel like it's weird because I don't think we're going to see the hard compound tyre in any of the racing this weekend. I feel like maybe they're just running the hard compound tyre because they don't want to sort of cut into any of the softs or mediums that they need for later on in the weekend. I could see a lot of teams holding back when it comes to... there is Adrian Newey making his way over across the pit lane. He's got an iPad and a book, of course. Or is it just a book? I thought it was an iPad. Might just be a pen and paper. It's again, Adrian Newey is so old, man. Still drawing on a pen and paper. And yet, the team principal next year. Max is calling Latifi to replace Albon in Abu Dhabi. Latifi makes a comeback in Abu Dhabi. I feel like, you know, when it happened in 2021, I felt bad for Lewis Hamilton fans because, you know, he'd been in the championship battle for so long and it had gone all the way down to the wire and been super close and very competitive between Max Verstappen and Lewis all year. But I never really could understand the full range of emotions that would have been going through their minds. If next weekend Lando Norris is leading and there's a crash and he loses the championship to Max Verstappen in the final race of the season. I think it's even worse because it's not even like Max Verstappen and Lando Norris have been vying for the championship all year long. Like, even Lando Norris only took the championship lead in Mexico, and Max Verstappen was so far adrift in the championship, it was insane. So I don't even know how I would feel. I don't want to contemplate those feelings because it would just be ridiculous if if Max Verstappen's able to win this championship because of some shenanigans in Abu Dhabi again. I think I might just quit. I definitely would steer clear of the Crash Happy podcast for a little while, I think. Or do I just have to take my medicine? I think I just have to take it, don't I? It would be a tough hour. It would be a tough hour of recording. I'll tell you that. Has swapped around a little bit though. Latifi is in my mind. Piastri, God, that is a Freudian slip, isn't it? Piastri down into 10th place now, behind Kimi Antonelli. But again, still running the hard compound tyre, 0.6 per second off the pace. No real understanding of the true pace that these cars have got on the proper qualifying tyres. Verstappen in second. Thank you, Dano. I will come on Crash Happy. Don't worry. Maybe just I'll need something. I'll need one of you to be in my corner. But that's not going to happen. People don't realize the drivers are human too. Oh, certainly, yeah. I mean, this race more than any other, right? Are they wearing the cooling vest this weekend? Actually, hadn't looked at that either. Normally, I do my research during FP1. I'll have it on in the background. I'll be like, what's actually happening this weekend? If you're Greek, become an F1 driver. Has there ever been a Greek F1 driver? Not that I can think of. There must have been, right? Greek F1 driver. There have been no Greek drivers that competed in the Formula One World Championship. Well, German touring cars. GP3, there's been a Greek driver. But that is all. And DTM. Yeah, there's been no Greek drivers. To be fair, F1 drivers are usually from a few countries. There hasn't been that much variation in terms of the countries Formula One drivers have been from. There's been a few here and there where they've cropped up, like Pastor Maldonado being Venezuelan. But even Alex Albon being Thai, it's kind of like, well, yeah, he's got a Thai racing license, but grew up in the UK and is kind of as British as they come for a lot of things. I think, Germany, France, Britain, Brazil, Italy, just Europe. Well, thank you, Dan. Good luck for the weekend. My boss is saying lunch break is over. Good luck. Good luck, Dan. Good luck with Mr. V this weekend. Oh, no, it's still Friday, isn't it? I get the days. Good luck with Mr. V and whatever you're doing. I'm sure we'll hear about it on Monday. Finland, yeah. Finnish drivers. Again, not many of them, but they're always really, really good. So if you're from Finland, you're either an absolute legend of a driver or you get nowhere close. That's where we're at. Why are we talking about this again? Not sure. Not sure. Lewis Hamilton slots into the pit lane. We haven't talked about Lewis yet. Is Hamilton depressed? Says Sugio. I think yes. When it comes to his Ferrari career so far. I mean, he said last weekend that he's not even looking forward to next year anymore. He's kind of given up on the Ferrari dream. I think they there was some kind of car project, I want to say for the F44. I remember reading a little bit about that Lewis Hamilton was part of a project there with Ferrari, and then from kind of under his nose, they've just cancelled that as well. So I think he's not very happy with the behind the scenes at Ferrari. He's not very happy with the on track at Ferrari. He's not very happy in general at this moment in time, is Lewis. He's having a tough year. Not even a podium. What was it, a couple of years ago when he'd won a Grand Prix in every single year that he'd raced in Formula One, even when he'd been in absolute dogs of cars, he'd still been able to get the car to the top step of the podium at some point. We're now looking at a year where Lewis Hamilton is not even going to have a third place finish to his name. It is a damning indictment on Ferrari and a damning indictment on the fact that the team were looking so competitive at the end of last season, even vying for the Constructors' Championship alongside McLaren up until Abu Dhabi. And now they could feasibly finish fourth in the Constructor standings and actually look fairly likely to finish fourth in the Constructor standings, I know Verstappen is a one-man band at Red Bull, but he is still outscoring the Ferrari drivers most weekends. And then Russell and Antonelli. Antonelli said himself last weekend in Vegas was probably his best drive in Formula One to date. And I can't really disagree with him. It was a very, very good drive from Kimi Antonelli. And we saw both of the Mercedes cars on the podium after the DNFs. So you're looking at the fact that Mercedes and Red Bull are elongating the lead that they've got in the Constructors, where 2 races ago, Ferrari were sitting second in the Constructors' Championship. Like, that's how bad it's gotten. They've been caught up by Mercedes and Red Bull. They've been overtaken by Mercedes and Red Bull and are now looking horrendously slow in comparison to Mercedes and Red Bull. So it is all falling apart. And in fact, they're showing a graphic of it now in terms of the points that they had. Ferrari and Mercedes were vying for it. Red Bull had a little bit better start to the season because of Verstappen, but Ferrari were fairly strongly second place in the Constructors for a little while. Then it kind of swapped again between Mercedes and Ferrari, but they were always sitting second or third until the last couple of races, dropped down even behind Red Bull. And when Red Bull's got one driver, apologies, Yuki Tsunoda, I know you scored, 20 odd points, but when Red Bull have really only got one driver and Ferrari have dropped behind them after 22 races, is just falling apart at Ferrari at the moment. But going back to Lewis Hamilton, 2026, I know he's contracted for it, and I think he will race it. There's even been a little bit of a rumor like, will Lewis Hamilton even bother racing in 2025? In 2026, because he just doesn't look like he's enjoying Formula One at the moment and doesn't look like he is optimistic about Ferrari's chances moving forwards into the new regulation cycle from what he's seen. So will he even bother? I think he will. I think he will continue on. I think he will do one more season under the new regulations. Then the question is, does he remain there for 2027? And even Charles Leclerc has started to sort of talk about / think about his future and whether or not he'll be at Ferrari in 2027 and onwards. We could feasibly in a situation where 2026 goes poorly for Ferrari and 2027 they lose Charles Leclerc and they lose Lewis Hamilton. Like, Ferrari could be 2 drivers out the door at the end of 2026. Like, I'm really looking forward to making a video on who will be where in 2026, because I think it could be a real mixed grid. And I think actually, a lot of drivers moved last season to get themselves prepared for the 2026 regulations with new teams. And then there's the hope of the new 2026 regulation cycle. I think once we see that hope die for a few drivers, right? We see that sort of 2026, not everyone can win it. You know, 2026, we're saying, oh, Mercedes might be really good because they've got the engine, or Aston Martin might be really good because they finally got their factory and everything together. They've got Adrian Newey, or Red Bull will be really good because they've held on to Max Verstappen. And, you know, we saw what they did in 2022. And Ferrari will be really good because they've put all their eggs in the 2026 basket. Audi coming in, they'll be really good. Like, not everybody can be really good. There's going to be somebody who, or at least a few teams that fall away. And there's going to be a few teams that are disappointed by the fact that they're either not winning or not top of the midfield and not doing what they expect to be doing. So there's going to be some hopes and dreams die in 2026. And then I think that even rolls into 2027. And we could see another big driver shift when it comes to the 2027 season. Should I do a video on that? Maybe. I hadn't really thought about it until you'd said it right now. But I think the 2026 driver championship and also then the silly season driver swaps will be pretty spectacular. I'm really looking forward to 2026. Cannot wait for it to happen. And the fact that next year I've sort of, well, as you can see, I now, on a Friday, have a dedicated day to you guys, to Formula One, to YouTube. I just can't wait. 2026 is going to be my year, lads. It's the big year. We're going to make it. We're going to go big. Dan No Skills left the chat now, but he's got to be worried. I'm coming for him. Now, we're a team. We're a team at Crash Happy. We all win when one of us wins. What I really need is, like, Dan to absolutely, like, become the biggest Formula One YouTuber by a considerable margin, like absolutely blow up. I could have Dan do that, and then once Dan does that, I'll just ride on his coattails, you know? I'm more than happy to be like, I don't know, what's the equivalent? If Crash Happy was like, I suppose there's only 5 of us, but I was going to say like a beta squad or a sidemen. There's 5 in the beta squad, right? But let's say we're the sidemen. If Dan could be KSI and like absolutely explode, or even like a Rotashaw, then I am happy to slot in and be Simon? Maybe? I was trying to think. Josh? Maybe I'm Josh. I do quite a lot of the behind the scenes bits and pieces, but then we all do behind the scenes bits and pieces. I'm happy to slot in and be that kind of second rung and just ride off Dan's coattails. Here we go then. 15 minutes left to go. There is Liam Lawson inside of it. McLaren are testing in FP1 right now, I feel like. I mean, everyone is still running the hard compound tyre for the majority. We're now getting to the main running, I would imagine. A lot of cars coming back into the pit lane. Final kind of 10-minute stint. Ready and raring to go. 14 minutes on the clock. Only Hulkenberg, Hamilton, Ocon, and Behrman out on track at the moment. McLaren's undercarriage is sparking too much again. I am sure that they are going to be on that like an absolute mental patient. Does that make any sense? No. They're going to be on that to such a heavy extent that there is no way that they're going to have a problem with ride height again. Like, they are going to be watching that like a hawk. They're going to be watching that so closely. There is no chance that there is going to be a double disqualification in any sense when it comes to this weekend. It's Friday. When it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, what? Very good. I think it seems we wanted to do long runs with one practice session. Oh, yeah, everyone has, right? I think the majority have done 20-plus laps. Just looking at, like, Russell 25, Verstappen 21, Antonelli 24, Norris 19, Piastri 20. But now we're seeing some soft compound tyres on. So Hadjar's on the soft, Lawson's on the soft, Stroll, Ocon, Behrman. They're all on the soft compound tyre. So we are going to start to see some proper low-fuel soft compound tyre running just to prepare the cars for the qualifying session later today, which we will be live for. Don't you worry. Shout out, please. Sure. Alavashan Iran. I try. McLaren will be running a monster truck suspension. Yeah, they'll be running it even just a little bit higher than they want to, right? I think, you know, they'll run it. They'll be like, right, optimally, we should run it at like whatever it is, 15 mil from the ground. And then they'll be like, no, well, that's absolutely insane. I don't know why I said 15. It was a stupid number. But the point stands. They'll then just be like, right, just in case, we'll up it just another quarter of a mil. I will just bump it up a tiny little bit. They will definitely be making sure that that does not happen again. Yuki's fighting for his seat. I think it's done. I think Yuki's gone. He was very dejected in the press conferences yesterday with Yuki Tsunoda. He was kind of talking more about Max Verstappen's title chances and the fact that he wants to help Max Verstappen with that rather than his own future and what's kind of moving forwards with him. Hajar, soft compound tires. Behrman comes across the line, still 0.2 of a second off George Russell's lap time. Hajar improving through the middle sector though. Purple sector from Isaac Hajar. Some soft compound tires being strapped to some other cars as well. Alonso, Albon, Sainz now on some soft compound tires. Last chance to really run it before we have our qualifying session. Isaac Hajar comes across the line 3.5 of a second quicker than George Russell, Isaac Hajar. So Hajar looks to be on it once again. When is he not? You know, he's had a very consistent season inside of that Racing Bulls. He was talking about his chances of finishing 9th place in the driver standings, and that's the real goal for him in these last couple of race weekends. Hajar going for it, though. I feel like a top half finish for Isaac Hajar, like top 10 in the championship, would be ridiculous in your rookie season. That'd be a very, very solid season for him. Yuki might end up being a reserve driver for the rest of his career and racing other series like Van Dorn. Yeah, true. Yeah, Stoffel Van Dorn obviously had to make the swap. I just don't know what I can see Yuki Tsunoda racing. Can you see him in like a Formula E? Maybe I was going to say an IndyCar, but then I can't really see him doing that either. Maybe he does just sort of end up being a reserve and maybe WEC does some world endurance. Why did McLaren get disqualified? They ran the car too low and the plank underneath the car, which you're allowed to have a little bit of it wear away as the race continues, but more than the allowed amount. They had way more wear on that plank, and then it was under the regulation height. And that's a solid straight disqualification. Liam Lawson struggling inside of the car. Lance Stroll comes across the line to go second fastest at Aston Martin. Then Carlos Sainz comes across the line to go even quicker still. Alonso then jumps to the top of the standings. George Russell, who was quickest on the hard compound tyre, now down to 5th. So the soft compound tyre times are starting to roll. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. We got to start seeing some movement. Of course, medium compound tyres required for the first 2 qualifying stints that we're going to see later today, but giving us an idea of that top end pace that these cars have got. Still remember though, Russell was quickest in that kind of race pace stint, although that was just a one-off lap. So I'd have to review his overall stint, those 20 plus laps. Alonso quickest though. Who do I want to win? I mean, I'd love Lando Norris to just sign, seal, deliver this Formula One championship this season and not have to go through the nightmare scenario of having to watch the final Grand Prix of the season, hoping and praying that I finally see a McLaren driver win a driver's championship. Like, I appreciate that. Like, there'll definitely be fans of teams out there like if you're a fan of like Haas, maybe since they've come into the sport, or a fan of Alpine, you've had an even worse time than me in recent years. But then maybe a slightly better time when they were Renault. But if you're like one of the fans of one of the midfield teams, you know, you haven't seen a driver win a championship either. But I literally started watching Formula One, or kind of really got into Formula One, just as McLaren started to become terrible. Like, we had won championships before, and all I got to hear about was, oh, Prost did this in a McLaren, Senna did that in a McLaren, James Hunt did this in a McLaren, even like Hamilton did that in a McLaren. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to see some championships. I've picked a decent team. And then it all fell apart. So, like, I just really want to see one driver's champion inside of my lifetime in a McLaren. Like, that'll do me. Just the one. I'd be more than happy with. And I just like it. Signed, done. Lando Norris walks out of Qatar, drivers' championship in hand. But I think, you know, as an also Formula One fan, take my McLaren hat off, put my Formula One hat on. If it went into the final race of the season, we still had Norris, Piastri, and Verstappen all within touching distance of the championship. That would be good. That would be good. Renault have had incredible success. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, if you're a Renault fan, if you're a Renault fan 20 years ago, you saw back-to-back world championships with Fernando Alonso. So Renault have had a good chunk of success. Oh, and it's Lance Stroll has gone wide. And they have put in some new gravel traps around here in Qatar as well. It is not as forgiving as a circuit as it was last year. The gravel traps also now causing a little bit of a headache for the drivers on this track. They are starting to dip their tires into them more often than you would like to see, as Franco Colapinto also goes over one of those brand new gravel traps that they have added. So basically, you know, I like the fact that Qatar have added those. They've made it more difficult to actually, you know, or they've made it more punishing, I should say, if you do go outside of the white lines, and if you do push it too hard, there's actual gravel there. There's an actual punishment for you, rather than what we had last year was a lot of the cars just going wide and not really being that bothered about it. They just go for another lap and see what they can do. But this year, I like the addition of the gravel traps. There's quite a few that have been added around the circuit. Norris and Piastri have gone to the top of the timing sheets, by the way. Norris 3.5 tenths of a second quicker than Piastri. So that is ominous for the two championship rivals behind him in Piastri and Verstappen, because if Lando Norris can deliver that kind of form going into qualifying and then the race, might end up being one of those clean sweep weekends for Lando Norris like we saw in Mexico and Brazil, where he just manages to outclass the rest of the field. Mexico in particular was probably Lando Norris's best performance in a Formula One car. He is in good form, is Lando Norris. But actually, Oscar Piastri going quicker in the first sector than his teammate. Sets a purple first sector. Improved in the middle sector as well, Piastri. So looking like this time might be competitive as he goes through a plume of smoke and dust as whoever went through the final turn 16 before Oscar Piastri decided to throw up a lot of gravel. But Piastri does still improve, and it's a purple final sector for Piastri as well. Very nice indeed for Oscar Piastri. 20.924. So only 0.06 of a second quicker than Lando Norris, but quicker nonetheless. That is what matters when it comes to Oscar Piastri versus Lando Norris this afternoon. Fernando Alonso comes across the line to displace Isaac Hadjar from third place. Max Verstappen has now dropped all the way down to fifth fastest, but hasn't done as many laps on those soft compound tyres as the drivers around him, as Carlos Sainz also then goes fourth fastest. So the McLarens seeming like they are outright favourites at the moment. Then Alonso Sainz, Hadjar in the mix. The Ferraris down there. The Mercedes cars not quite as quick on this soft compound tyre. George Russell put in the fastest lap of anybody on the hard compound tyre, but didn't quite have the same pace on the softs. Couple of minutes left. Didn't experience the McLaren Honda, but yeah, 2023 was pretty traumatizing. I mean, 2022 was pretty bad too. The fact that we came, fifth in the Constructors. We lost out to Alpine for fourth place in the Constructors by the tiniest of margins. And had it gone slightly differently at the end of the season, we would have been fourth best in 2022. But I mean, I'd rather that trajectory. We lose out to Alpine in 22, but then, win back-to-back Constructors Championships and Alpine drop to the bottom of the Constructors Championship than the other way around. I'd rather it be us that miss out in 2022 and gain in 23, 24, 25 versus Alpine. But that was pretty horrible too as a McLaren fan, if a move in the right direction. Nico Hulkenberg on board with him also dips a tire into the gravel. These cars, everybody finding the limit of them, but also those gravel traps are punishing. Oh, George Russell, that middle sector was not something to write home about, and then puts his Mercedes car through the gravel as well and goes wide to George Russell at turn 14. So that is not going to be an improvement from George Russell in any way. And in fact, he's maybe just going to dip back into the pits with 40 seconds to go. Oh, no, he could actually get to the checkered flag. It's just going to... Depends what Gabriel Bortoleto does in front of him, but I think Bortoleto is going to go. Colapinto comes into the pits. Hadjar and Lawson, I think, also making their way in. Carlos Sainz the same. So most drivers getting towards the end of their final run. I know, Lawson coming back out. Not really sure why. Maybe wants to do a race start. Hadjar coming out as well. Not going to do a flying lap. Verstappen on an out lap. 6th place at the moment. Piastri quickest still. Lando Norris second behind him. So it is looking like the McLarens might have it. The Ferrari and Mercedes cars behind a gaggle of midfielders. Alonso, Sainz, Hadjar, Albon. Kind of the main men that you'd expect to be there in the mix. Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari down in 12th place. Goodness me. Don't boo Norris. I mean, he's not even fastest. He's literally second behind Oscar Piastri. That is it. Free practice 1 in the books. Alonso, Hadjar came back out on the hard compound tire. I think going to do a practice race start. But they were quick. Otherwise, Alonso, 3rd fastest. We've had a few false dawns from Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin, though, haven't we, this season, where they've looked very, very quick in qualifying and then, in free practice, and then not been able to deliver quite the same pace when it's come to qualifying. So wouldn't read too much into that Aston Martin 3rd place from Fernando Alonso. We'll have to wait and see whether it becomes competitive. Carlos Sainz, though, being the higher placed Williams car once again. At the second half of the season, Carlos Sainz has really come into his own, hasn't he? Isaac Hadjar down in 5th. We expect him to be in the top 10 later on today. Always seems to deliver. Does Isaac Hadjar? Has been very consistent this year. Albon down in 7th. Again, if you're going to pick a midfield car, he's 8th in the championship for a reason. Very, very consistent. Maybe a little bit off it in the second half of the season compared to the first, but Albon's still very much capable of putting in one of those performances. Lance Stroll also in the midfield battle, the Aston Martin, then 9th place. Then you're into those kind of mix. Charles Leclerc was 8th place ahead of Stroll, and then Antonelli behind in 10th. Hulkenberg, Hamilton, Tsunoda, Russell. And it's looking pretty tough if you're an Alpine fan or you're a Haas fan this weekend by the lap times that we saw so far. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I really enjoyed that. A little bit of a cathartic yap at the camera / going through, well, we went through quite a lot. We talked about Qatar. We talked about Hamilton at Ferrari. We talked about Adrian Newey at Aston Martin. We talked about Red Bull's drivers going into next season and a lot of nonsense along the way as well. So appreciate it. DNF or DNQ for Norris? I really hope not. It's practice, but I love Alonso. I hope so. I hope he can be as competitive as he is. I love Fernando Alonso too. Not that I'd say it too loud to some of the other fans of Formula One because, you know, it's kind of their thing. But I do like Fernando Alonso. I'd like to see him do well. But I'm going to end the stream there. We're going to be back live again in like 2 and a bit hours time for the sprint qualifying. In fact, I'll put that live on the channel now after this. So you can leave a like on this one. And then you can also, in fact, let me make it public right now. Let me make the sprint qualifying live stream that we're going to have later on public on the channel right now. So guess what? You could go and leave a like on that live stream already. And guess what? I've got even more for you. If you want to watch some Formula One content, I released a brand new video this week, which is the top link in the description, which you should also most definitely check out. Even if you watched it already, just watch it again. Give it another like, give it another view, give it another subscribe. You know, just go down there, log in a new email address and watch it again. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you later on. Enjoy. I'll see you in... I want to work out the proper time. A little while for another live stream and a competitive session where if Piastri is on top once again, it looks to be very spicy indeed come Saturday's sprint race.